outpouring of grief. This grief is in response to George Floyd's death and to the systemic injustices that continue to define the lives of people of color here, as well as everywhere in the world. There's so much more to say and a lot more to do. For now, we hear you and we grieve with you. And for Blackout Tuesday, tomorrow, June 2nd, the music industry is pausing to recognize these events, and we're going to be doing so as well. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to pre-record this panel. So with that, as a little bit of a somber setting, we have an exciting topic to talk through today in the world of virtual music, as we see some really incredible things happening. And I will shortly introduce our panelists. I am Sarah Vick. I'm an executive producer at Intel Studios. I've been involved with a variety of virtual music projects. They included Runnin, which is a virtual music video, collaborated with Reggie Watts. It's also one of the most fun music videos you can possibly get yourself into. I also worked on Grease AR, which was a collaboration with Paramount Pictures to bring Grease to the augmented reality world. And I also worked on Superhuman AR, which was a K-pop music video, and that debuted in Seoul last December, and then was set to debut in the US at South by Southwest. Of course, that is still pending to come out here in the US. I'm joined by Amy Lemire, one of the biggest music geeks I know, and a great supporter of new voices in the immersive industry. As the managing partner at the WXR Fund, she is investing in early stage companies with female leadership that are transforming businesses, including in the music industry.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm also joined by Eric Bagliardo. He's a creative technologist with a long history of exploring how we experience music virtually. And from Tweet Singer to all the way to one of my personal favorite immersive music experiences with Childish Gambino on the Google Lens. And last but certainly not least, I am joined by Natalie Dawn. Natalie is half of the musical duo Pomplamoose, and that band has been pioneering the art of the video song on YouTube. If you have not checked them out, I encourage you to pause this feed and go and check one out. They are really fun and awesome. I'm a huge fan. They've also been an early adopter of the Patreon platform, which allows fans to support artists directly for their art. And I can attest to both the band's musicality and their avid fan base. It was all my dad could talk about when we went and saw you guys at the Fairground Ballroom last December. So you have a fan in the form of at least two of the Vic clan, many more probably.
Oh, thank you.
So in terms of kind of setting the stage for our conversation, before this global pandemic, we were already seeing artists use technology in really interesting and new ways to connect with fans. But it was really like these musicians were typically outliers and ahead of their time in some ways. And now during the pandemic, we've actually seen that this is becoming much more the norm. And we're witnessing in some ways an industry transformation. And I know that each of us has some of our favorite examples of some of these, and I was hoping we could do just a quick round robin of what are some of our favorite examples of virtual music in 2020. And Amy, do you want to start us off?
So you know that we could fill the entire panel with just talking about it. So I'm going to talk about the virtual experiences and the virtual reality experiences that I've liked. And there are many, but on the virtual side, obviously Travis Scott in Fortnite was epic, both because it looked good and it sounded good and you could interact with it, but also it attracted 48 million viewers over 48 hours, which is just insane for a 15-minute clip of music. But that was super fun. I've also loved all the DJ sets from D-Nice and Questlove and Beatport. Those are really fun. But on the augmented and virtual reality side, I think right after Shelter in Place in San Francisco, which was March 16th or 17th, the band Real Estate came out with something they called Quarantour, and I think it was built with Eighth Wall, and it's augmented reality where you can watch the band play literally, on your tabletop. So that one's super fun. And I love watching Reggie Watson participating in his Saturday Alt Space activities and interacting with him there. So wide variety of things, but yeah, definitely a lot of creativity coming out in this time.
Natalie, do you want to talk about what you've done with your musician community in terms of giving so many people kind of a microphone through some of your video work?
Oh, yeah. I mean, gosh, we've definitely had to sort of shift our process since this has happened. But, the great thing about being part of a community is that, even when something like this happens and you're all in completely different places, you're still connected because you have that community. So we've been really fortunate that, to give you a little bit of a background, before COVID, before we, started living life in quarantine, we were going once a month and recording 4 songs in a day, and then releasing 1 song a week. So we were going video, we had our camera crew, we had our musicians that we worked with, and we worked with all sorts of different types of musicians and tried to vary the sort of setup each time. And then when this happened, we started, instead of being in one room with all of these musicians, we started giving work to producers and saying, hey, we still want to collaborate with other musicians, but you're going to be primarily in charge of producing this track. Hire other musicians to work with you remotely, hire the bass player, hire the drummer, or let's work with, this singer in Spain or in England, let's reach out to people who are in the world, we're all going through this together. So let's figure out how to do this together. And it's been so much work, but also so much more creativity has come out of it. So that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
Eric, do you have a favorite or a few favorites?
As far as things I've seen out of the world right now, I think Amy stole all the good ones. Absolutely echo the Travis Scott thing was next level. Not quite VR, XR, but the level of immersion and just the fidelity, and also just the different interaction modes. They just took an existing platform and just made it so much fun. You could jump up in the air, you could swim through the water. So I thought that was phenomenal. I think on the more XR, VR front, I'm super stoked about the stuff that Wave XR is doing and their partnership with a major label. And just their tagline is so good. It makes me mad that I didn't come up with it. The show must go beyond. So I think that there's just some really awesome movement there that is starting to shine a light on how we can use virtual production and VR to be cross-platform in a way that will have increased adoption. So I think taking this moment in time where we're looking for alternatives and using creativity and innovation, like using VR as a production tool, is opening up to such a wider audience that alone gets me excited.
Yeah, and I'm definitely hearing a similar response as artists and labels approach Intel Studios to say, hey, how can we take virtual production? How can we use volumetric capture to push the way we've engaged with audiences? And we've obviously had a couple examples in the past, but it's definitely getting accelerated by the time that we're in, and this need for a new level of creativity and a new level of innovation to bring the communities together virtually. So I think each of us have had a couple of different experiences in terms of the way that we've pioneered this space. I wanted to take a little while on the panel to really talk through what are some of the learnings that we've had from those experiences. Natalie, I was going to toss you the first question to kind of talk through why did you choose to use such a different approach from the traditional model? of creating music videos and publishing them and accessing your fans and all of that? Kind of, what were some of the key things that you guys were thinking about at the time and made you take that extra leap?
Oh gosh. Well, we've been putting videos online since basically the advent of YouTube. We caught that very first wave back when it was just a website. And they would put you on the front page of YouTube if your video was really extra good. And so we've been doing this for a pretty long time. And over that, like, our videos have evolved like quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason why we do this is because we're introverts, and I think a lot of musicians out there, they like really want to be on the road. They really want to be on stage. We being in front of our fans for like stints for like doing a few shows, but it really, both Jack and I, we both get like pretty exhausted by it. It's it's surprisingly difficult to be living on the road. But honestly, that wasn't even an option in the beginning. We had no fans in the beginning, so the question was just, how do we get fans? And we started putting videos online because YouTube had just started, and we were seeing kids in their bedrooms playing guitar and getting thousands of views just like singing a cover. And we realized, like, oh my gosh, this is where we should be, where we need to be, putting our music if we want to actually have a fan base that we can connect with in a similar way to like what you get at a live show. Because you have people who are subscribing to your videos, who are coming back week after, and who are leaving comments, and you're building those connections with those people. And so we just basically started, feeding into that way of being an introverted musician, and making a living online.
That's awesome. Eric, maybe I would love for you to kind of build on that and also touch on a little bit of what made it, like, some of the work that you've done, the biggest technical challenges that you had, because I think that being a creative technologist, you're sometimes like very front lines of those challenges that have faced the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things about XR and VR is there's definitely this new medium that's always a great place to start telling new stories. But to be able to find your audience when people are not used to this type of behavior is a challenge in and of itself. So if you're going onto a platform like YouTube and you're trying to think, how do I build a fan base? You have to kind of get creative. You have to figure out what's happening out there. So I think right now that's one of the things I personally think is a big challenge for XR is, how do we find fans, or how do the fans find us? And that's one of there's a few silver linings in the pandemic. Now there's this captive audience. But I think for the technical challenges, and because that's more of a behavioral challenge to try to find the eyeballs. But technically speaking, I think this field is evolving so rapidly. The learning curve becomes quite interesting, and it almost becomes impossible for any one person to truly be an expert in the field, and you really have to start specializing in one aspect of it. For me personally, I've been focusing in on augmented reality a lot more in the last few years, but certainly in the last 10 or 15 years since I've been working with technology, it just changes so quickly. The challenges change, like by the minute. So it's hard for me to really pin down one. For the Childish Gambino project, we were sponsored by Google, and so they wanted us to feature a new aspect of AR4, which was cloud anchors, which allowed people to have a shared augmented experience. So you could go into an augmented space with multiple mobile devices and all experience the same kind of music video. And so in that instance, the challenge is kind of given to us. They're like, how are you going to solve this technical challenge? So in that area, it kind of helped us focus on finding the problem and finding the solution. So there's a bit of a process there. So, but so many technical challenges that are trying to be solved right now. I would say this, as I've been talking too long. I think there's a confluence. I think we're actually coming into a really sweet spot. We're finally going to get a lot of technologies maturing at the same time. And I think we're almost at an explosion where this technology is really going to take hold, where we'll have like 5G connectivity along with more mature devices, or being able to offload processing to like the cloud. So I think we're going to get to a moment pretty soon where the technology has solved itself, and we can start thinking about how to make awesome content. Because that's really where the exciting stuff is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that both the kind of the up-leveling of technology altogether, which is something we're completely seeing, and also you made a point around the technology is so broad that being an expert in every aspect of it is not impossible. And that's definitely something that we were really grateful for with working with Reggie Watts, is he is a VR nerd. He is a bigger VR nerd than I am, by a substantial margin, actually, right? And because I have a much broader like interest across a lot of different immersive projects, and he is just phenomenal at kind of understanding the spatial medium in and of itself. And that was one of the things that really made that project, that Runnin VR project, work, I think. What are some of our other thoughts on like what else makes this work? Like what makes for a good project? Amy, do you want to chime in for examples where you've seen great projects and what you thought made them work?
Yeah, so I think the key for me is that interaction, because it's hard to capture, and there are new ways of doing it, right? Like Eric's piece, Pharaoh's AR, where you could interact with different fans, you could interact with the wall, that felt new and unique and exciting. Also, to me, audio is really important. So if it doesn't sound good, it's less appealing to me. Ambisonic and spatial audio is super fun. And so it's nice to see people experiment with that as well.
Yeah. Natalie or Eric, do you have other thoughts on kind of what have you seen that made it like super successful? What made for a good project or a good?
Sarah, I was actually hoping you could tell us more about the Reggie Watts project, because I've seen the case study videos. I've done the experience kind of in a pre-beta version. I'd love to hear about that process and some of the things that were cool for you guys.
Yeah, the Runnin was super fun for it to come together. I think that Kira Bensing was absolutely critical in the early stages to like expressing a vision for what this could be. And she really emphasized very early on that interactivity was going to be absolutely critical for the entire experience, and that we wanted to make people feel welcome in the space. VR is a tough medium to get into, right? It's not super comfortable when I get you into my VR room and then set, a giant rig on your head and tell you to stand over here and is the audio on or not? And so those two design principles of like inclusion for anyone who might come across this experience, and also an interactivity to make it fun, were really critical. What was interesting is after we did the shoot and actually had all of kind of the footage of the dancers, and for folks who haven't been in Runnin, it's effectively a disco dance floor with a lot of really colorful changes, and it uses some of the spatial aspects of virtual reality. The dance floor gets bigger, it becomes multidimensional. It's super fun. And so once we had captured all the footage and started putting everyone into the dance floor, that was also when we started realizing some of the boundary functions, right? We were giving people too much interactivity, so we had to pull that back. And it turns out that the main interaction in the experience is that you dance with the dancers, and that's really all you need. Turns out people love to dance together. Who knew? And I think that iterative process in the post-production phase was also really critical for us, right? That it wasn't just, you're not going to know right off the bat everything. You have to have a vision, but it's going to be such an iterative process going throughout and really collaborative with the technical team, collaborative with the musical artists themselves, with the designers. I mean, everyone kind of had a voice in that process. And I think that was really important to our success, for sure.
I'm currently working on a couple different projects in the musical space. One is like a platform to give virtual production tools to the masses.
Oh, cool.
One spectrum that's trying to democratize XR in a way. And then on the other end of the spectrum is much more high-minded ways of trying to bring together some really large corporations to fund innovative projects like the Gambino project. So I think it's interesting trying to see these different business models, trying to figure out like where should we go next? What's going to fund the model? So I'm kind of curious, like maybe you can tell us a bit more about like the Intel model. Like I know I'm like hijacking the panel right now, but are we going to get to see more things like that, like Runnin, or?
Oh, I 100% hope so. We're working on them. So I think that this actually relates to one of the other questions we kind of all wanted to tackle, which was this notion of how do we take some of these experiences and move from philanthropy to actually being able to make a living with virtual music. I think in the pandemic, we've seen such a trend in everyone jumping on platforms and being able to put something out there. My personal favorite is the daily Sophie Tucker live stream plug. It's 10 a.m. on the West Coast every day, so it's coffee in hand, slippers on feet, dance party in my living room. But that is fundamentally free, right? They're putting it on Twitch, they're putting it on Instagram Live, they're putting it on Facebook Live, they're making it as accessible as possible to build a community of people who need to feel like there's people out there with them, right? We're all alone in our living rooms, and this gives us a way to feel not alone. And I think what they're doing there is incredible, and especially the community they've built. In terms of monetizing that, there's a long way to go. I know on the Intel side, we collaborate together with artists to do co-productions where we're able to help lend the tech and kind of give a leg up on building the tech in. And then we are working with artists to be able to monetize and commercialize those pieces. So the Reggie Watts piece actually went into an exhibition in Miami and was ticketed in December of last year. Now, that model has been disrupted yet again. Thank you to COVID-19. But we're definitely thinking about, are some of these immersive experiences premium enough that we can have audience members or fans actually pay for access. And that's definitely something that we're going to be pioneering and pushing forward in the next year or so.
And go ahead.
I was just talking to someone recently about an experience of a music festival that they went to in a virtual reality platform called Verbella. I think it happened about 2 weeks ago. And they said 200 to 300 people paid $15 to go in and experience that. So, I mean, at least there's that. Hopefully we won't get in the habit of getting all this content for free, and that we can shift to a model where the musicians are getting paid.
Yeah, that was kind of a similar story I was going to share, but from a different angle, where I was trying to work with a local venue because they were trying to solve this where the show could go on, but they didn't want to pay anybody. They were like, we're not getting paid, we're not going to pay you guys, but we'll put you on our social media channels. Everybody will see it. And again, it's just, giving our content to the venue, giving the content to the internet. So this is a big question because so many artists are in this like gig economy. So that whole idea of funding is such a huge question right now.
Natalie, what do you think as an artist?
Oh gosh, I mean, I was kind of laughing as you were saying, like, we don't want people to get used to this being free, because it's like
content is on YouTube.
It's like everything we do is free. Like everything we make is free. I mean, like our music, you can listen to it on Spotify. I mean, there's no paywall for anything we do. So basically, fortunately we do actually make some money from downloads and streaming, which is great. I think it's actually, people realize Spotify gets kind of torn apart pretty frequently, but Spotify has been amazing for us, and I think it's a really great discovery tool for artists. And I think if you own your masters, you're actually making a good living from Spotify if you're getting upwards of 100,000 listeners a month. You're doing pretty well. So sorry. I'm like, how do I just talk about all of our revenue streams? Basically, like, I'm really grateful to the people who understand that even though art is free, the actual process of making art is not free. I don't actually think that, like, I'm not interested in charging more money for the videos and the music that we make. But when people actually recognize that, like, oh, you had to, pay your musicians and pay for the studio and pay for those cinematographers and those editors, and there's an entire team that contributes to this. When I realize that, I think, fortunately in our case, they've supported us on Patreon, and Patreon has become like a big way of how we fund our musical endeavors. Honestly, like, we wouldn't be able to hire the crews that we have if it weren't for Patreon. And I also have to say, in parentheses, my husband is the co-founder of Patreon. I want to just throw that out there, because I don't know, it's complicated to be like talking about how great it is as the artist using Patreon, and also, my husband made this thing. So yes.
I heard from so many artists about, and actually artists in the immersive space too, like both, I am a Patreon person. I like being a patron of multiple artists, and most of the artists I support are actually in the immersive space. And so I think that there is an interesting aspect to Patreon that I think is relevant here, which is the opt-in thing, right? Fans are, and you've done a great job, Natalie, of kind of messaging somewhat gently. And I think Kent Bai, who's a big VR advocate and immersive industry kind of spokesperson to some extent, has done similar things where he said, hey, if you like this podcast, please support me on Patreon, and helping fans and audiences opt in that way may be the first step to helping generate revenue streams. But I'm not convinced that that's going to be enough for some of these bigger, more loftier projects.
I think, I want to jump in. I think this is an interesting time because for so many years, there's a lot of consolidation in the music industry where we just saw the big players just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Where to me, it seemed like if you weren't like the top 1% or 2% of the artists, you kind of weren't making any money. And I think, unfortunately, that, very, one-sided, financial model really created vulnerability in a lot of the music industry. So when the virus came along, some of these companies and festivals were really just too big to be supported by an ad hoc model. And so I think that's put actually the big guys at some of the biggest risks, because it's difficult to pivot when you're too big. So I think that creates an interesting conundrum right now.
Yeah, and an interesting opportunity for more independent artists, hopefully.
I was talking to one of the folks at a really big music festival that unfortunately had to cancel recently, and they were debating, like, can we do a pay-per-view model? Will people pay for it? And that's very different than like a Patreon model where fans love it so much they will donate money. And that's kind of this, like, do you pay to get in the front door or do you pass the hat around? And so I think, that was a tough decision for them to have to go through that process to try to estimate or predict. So I think that some interesting questions we're on to ask ourselves in the industry, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another, I mean, like people, it's one thing for someone to decide to support an artist that has a face and a voice that they connect with, and where they don't want to live in a world where that artist is not making music. Other thing when it's a corporation, and that like a faceless entity, how do you keep those going?
Yeah.
To have a really sexy spokesperson.
Right. I think what's interesting for a lot of the projects I work on is we do have like corporate sponsorship, where if there's like a big new product feature from Google, then it's obvious kind of like where that money's coming from, and then we have the luxury to give the content away for free. And I think this is completely different in the world now, where everybody is just streaming straight to Instagram Live or to YouTube. So it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, I'm so curious. I'm so like kind of excited, kind of hesitant about what the future holds.
Eric, do you think that the sponsorship model will continue to play like a substantial role in this space, and for how long?
I do. That's a really great question. I think the conversations I'm having, there's just so many uncertainties. It's like, do we plan for the best case scenario? Do we plan for the worst case scenario? Do we plan for maybe like, a new top, or like another wave in the fall? So it's so hard to plan a big project like that it does call into question some of the big sponsorships. Whereas, the people that can move quickly can get up onto the streaming platforms and see if they can monetize it. So to be honest, I'm not sure if I have an answer for that. I think there are a lot of really big companies pivoting very, very quickly, like you see on television. But how you fund a nimble startup, with the VC model, those are some of the questions I have. Like, what is the right fit? Is it a nimble, Silicon Valley approach? Is it, grassroots approach? Is it big sponsorships? Honestly, I think it's going to be a combination of all of the above.
I agree with you. I mean, a little bit I think about it as when smartphones were first rolling out and we were seeing apps being built. Like, it used to be really expensive to build an app, and now almost anybody can build an app. Like, thank goodness, right? So I think immersive content is going to be somewhat similar.
And I love the fact that, Eric, you're working on like democratizing tools for virtual production, because that is 100% something that we need in order for that world to come true.
Absolutely.
I'm also I'm cautiously optimistic about the world of micropayments. I would really like micropayments to become more used and kind of things that we're familiar with here in the States, at least. I know other parts of the world are much more familiar with micropayments. So I don't know if anyone has any learnings about, actually, I don't know of many music platforms that have been using micropayments. Yeah, something for someone who's listening to this panel to try and then report back.
I get micropayments every time someone streams my music.
Exactly, right? It's interesting to think, what if instead of paying my Spotify subscription or my Tidal subscription, I was actually just like dinging. I think that would not work personally for me. I would just listen to my cash register ring, ring, ring all day.
Yeah. I feel like there is still room within streaming to have ad-supported models, which I think YouTube is great at, where you create that following, you place an ad, and you see a direct, return on that. So I feel like, I'm not sure if that qualifies as a micro transaction, but in some ways it's democratizing that content creation and the revenue, or the advertising dollars that used to be only accessible to like a big TV station for years and years. Now you can be a YouTube creator. So I think that's a solid model, and a lot of the YouTubers I follow are going on Patreon and like kind of supporting some of their fans in a way in reverse, because they're like, I wasn't impacted by the virus, like I saw an uptick in my revenue because of the stay-at-home economy. So a lot of things have turned their head because of the current world situation.
Yeah. So that might be a good segue to talking about kind of what are our greatest hopes and potential fears for the virtual music space. We can go around robin, each of us, on kind of what is the biggest thing that you'd like to see. I think Eric might be building the biggest thing that I want to see, so we can skip me for a second while I think of another. And also anything that you're worried about or want to like kind of think through and make sure that we're addressing in this time. Amy, can I toss it to you?
You can. Yeah, I agree. What I want to see the most is the ability to be able to scale the creation of these experiences. That is, and I think that takes multiple parts. I think it's not only having the tools for the creators to create, but I also think it's having the hardware that is comfortable and easy enough to use and affordable so that people can use it. And, you know, to a certain extent with AR, mobile AR, that's a given, right? Most of us already have mobile phones, but you know, fewer of us have VR headsets and even fewer of us have smart glasses, but all of that will come and the price will come down. So I think it's that combination of just more content.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things for me is when I've been having these conversations about emerging technology, so many times I'll say things like, this is going to be where the market is in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But I feel like because the COVID-19, we're like, okay, we're just in it. What can we deploy now? And you see an uptick in Oculus sales, and people are jumping back into VR very strongly at a consumer level. So I think that stuff is exciting for me. I think for a long, long time, my dream use case is AR glasses that are at a very nice price point, so that, and it's the new fashionable thing that everybody has to have, so that people just show up to a concert with the head-mounted display already on their face, and then we're just having a fun experience intuitively, and it just becomes, you know, human, part of the human experience. We're still not there yet, but I'm very confident we'll get there. The thing I'm worried about, this deserves its own panel, is some of the ethics around what happens when you've got, you know, a camera on your face, looking at the entire world, recording everything. All the big tech players have sophisticated AI doing things like semantically labeling and cataloging everything you look at. Like, they know if you're in the kitchen, they know if you're at a concert, and they have your location. And so privacy concerns to me is a very big issue as we start to map out and explore the whole metaverse.
Natalie, do you want to jump in?
Well, I have trouble talking about what I'm excited about in terms of VR. But I am excited about the music industry right now. I do think that it's an exciting time, especially to be an independent artist. I think that there are fewer barriers to entry than there have ever been, and there's a greater ability to connect with your fan base. It is a lot less expensive to make art and to make it well, and to get it directly to your fans. And, you know, I think, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm excited about, you know, fewer people feeling like the label is like signing to a label is the only way. So yeah, so that's exciting to me. And I'm also hopeful about just the world in general. And when everyone is going through something the way that we are now, that increases our empathy, and that in turn increases our generosity. And I think if we keep going with that, a lot of great things can come.
Yeah, I will wholeheartedly support an increase in generosity. I think one of the things I've seen that I wish we could make, like maybe it's low hanging fruit and it's something that someone who's listening can actually tackle, is the discoverability issue for some of these experiences. Mm-hmm. Even with all of the live streams coming up, and I think that there have been, how many different blog posts of here are all the different DJ sets happening every day, and here's the platform they happen on, and here's what time, and here's what you have to log into. And that extends definitely into the XR landscape of you kind of have to know that it's happening to find it. And I think I would love for there to be a greater tool for discoverability on some of these experiences, so that
MTV for XR.
You
want the MTV for XR?
I do. I really do.
I want the MTV for MTV.
That's so true. We want the old MTV back. It's interesting for me, going back to like Wave XR again, for them to be pushing out a VR musical experience and then simultaneously be streaming to Twitch. I couldn't think of a better way to just open the door to a broader market. So I think that's awesome. It's a similar approach I've been working on for a different project, which is just to, if you don't have the hardware, to be able to just stream to other platforms, and other platforms that are very easy to monetize, so that you can be a content creator regardless if people have the hardware. And to me, monetizing the XR content is still not a very straightforward process. Can you go away with selling stuff on Steam, or can you charge some kind of pay-per-view or set up a Patreon? So I think that path is still not clear. So to be able to push out to a very known platform like YouTube or Twitch, to me, that's a great way to introduce people to XR.
Yeah, I love those points. I think to wrap us up, I think we can we have a couple minutes each for sure to meander on this topic. What are some of your tips and tricks for both creators, artists, for maybe the new independent who's trying to get launched, for someone who's seeking funding? Anything that you guys want to add in and give as our optimistic view of how others can be successful in this space?
I'll jump in. Basically, Pamplemousse has had periods of growth and periods of very long periods of stagnation. And I feel really fortunate that right now we're doing well, because there were just years when nothing was happening, and we were trying so many things, and we had a morning show, and we had like all these different types of videos that we were making, and it just wasn't working. And I think the important thing to just remember is that everyone, anyone who's experienced any level of success has just hit wall after wall after wall after wall, and you just keep changing, you keep trying something new. I remember early on in my career, I thought that maybe things the way that they'd been done before, that to success. And I'm finding more than ever now that it is not about doing things the way they've been done before. You need to just try something new. That's what I would say. Just change it up. If it's not working, do something else.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I would echo that. Just start making things. And I think I think we're talking to a lot of tech forward people at the VRARGS. So I think if the business model is one that's originally designed for the pre-COVID world, you might need to start rethinking how you reach out to your audience and how you pivot. And so if you're creating, try to create for the times, but absolutely just keep making things and just go have some fun. And I feel like in some ways, for some of my friends, they're bored out of their minds doing the quarantine. I think I'm a bit of an introvert, so I've actually enjoyed all this free time to go and make things. So I was kind of forced to unplug. So I've been trying to use that time for creative projects.
Yeah, and I would say for those that might be watching that aren't experienced in this space, definitely just try to consume what's out there and see what's working and what isn't working and what resonates with you and what, you know, doesn't resonate. So try and experience more experiences. And in terms of raising money, I mean, right now, most of it is with the bigger tech companies or brands. If you're looking for a big project. And hopefully over the next, you know, things, as Eric was saying earlier, things are moving really quickly. So hopefully soon we'll have some platforms that make it easier for people to create spatial content. I mean, Eighth Wall is already coming out with things, and Niantic bought 6D.ai, and they already have occlusion integrated. So, you know, things are changing daily. So hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, and I can only echo what you said, Amy, and what you said, Eric, in terms of one, stay on top of the times. Intel Studios is definitely responding to the change of how we're approaching this industry by pushing to mobile as quickly as we can. And it's taking, we're a relatively small team, 20 folks down here in Los Angeles, but we're trying to take those experiences and put them into people's hands as quickly as possible. And we have a digital launch coming up for our first app, and I'm hoping to have a couple in the music space come out later in the summer. So definitely kind of responding to what the industry is doing and how our times are changing. And I will also say that the big corporations, if you're going to big companies, as I am part of one of those big companies, things are really changing inside of those companies too. So keep that in mind as you're talking to folks. The teams that you're talking to who are working on these projects may not know their own roadmap at this point in time because they are trying to adjust and change. So to the extent that you can stay optimistic and be working on projects while potentially hitting some extra brick walls, thanks to the volatility of quarantine and COVID-19, that I can highly recommend staying optimistic. So thank you guys for joining, and really excited for what's happening in the space. I think overall optimistic, and let's hope for some music for empathy, and our thoughts again to everyone staying silent on Blackout Tuesday tomorrow. So thank you. Bye.
Take care, guys.